G'day guys, welcome to my RXY's video. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about NRL Round 8 predictions for 2020 guys, so let's get started. So to kick it off with the first game of that round, we see the Storm going up against the Roosters. Now, this game's going to be a really hard match. I don't think it'd be really consecutive win for the Melbourne Storm. I just don't think that the Melbourne Storm are just going to have that good quality effort for that match. I just don't think that if this game's going to be a really hard game of football, I don't see it that often concealed into that win. But it really defies it whether or not if you have that consecutive players for that match, such as Paul Momorowski and Josh Adokar and Ryan Pappenhausen and so much more. I just think this game's going to be a really hard match, and going up against the Roosters, I reckon it'll be a field goal consecutive win for that game. And whether or not for the Roosters, this game for the Roosters, last time they obviously won that match, they are a very hard team to beat, and it's just going to defy whether or not the Roosters, if they're going to win that game, it's just going to be a really hard game of football. But I'm going to go with the Roosters by 8 points. I think that this game's going to be a really hard match, and it's going to be a really difficult game because it is a rematch of the grand final and like preliminary final from the premiership, I think, last year. So, excuse me, I just think that that game is going to be a really consecutive, focused game, and a lot of people will probably watch that match anyway and see how it goes with this game turning on to an absolute, probably a good match for the crowd that obviously loves the Roosters and the Storm anyway. But I'm going to go with the Roosters though by 8 points anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Raiders going up against the Dragons. Now, this game's going to be a really hard game of football. It's for the Dragons though. They are a really good they're a really good team that just doesn't really get a win sometimes, but they're just not a top 8 squad that just conceals a really good game for that match. And for the Raiders though, I don't think that if this game is going to be a really good game for them, sometimes they do lose, but sometimes they do win, but they come back for a win and they obviously make them pay. But I don't think the Dragons are basically going to win for that game. It defies whether or not they have good players or terrible players that have injuries or coming back from the injuries, and whether or not if they do play and then obviously get injured during the match, it's going to be really difficult to put pressure on for the Dragons that going up against the Raiders are just going to be really hard for this game, and I just think that this game is going to be a really hard match for that game. But whether or not for the Raiders though, they are a really good team that just doesn't really concede any points, but they just don't win a couple of games because they do struggle a little bit, but then they don't struggle a little bit, but then they obviously win, but then you obviously lose. So, I'm definitely going to go with the Raiders though by 14 points. I reckon they'll get the job done up against the Raiders, up against Dragons, sorry. And they are a really good team. But I reckon the Raiders will definitely get the job done up against the Dragons, and I reckon they'll put a really good game, and I reckon they'll put a lot of pressure up against the Dragons, and I reckon the Dragons will probably fall apart for this match anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Eagles going up against the Cowboys. Now, this game's going to be a really hard game because the Cowboys do struggle a little bit, but they obviously won Because last week when they won against the Knights, it was obviously 32 points to 20, and the Knights were struggling a little bit, but then they put a couple of points on, and they obviously didn't think they were going to get smashed, but they did obviously lose, but they obviously played really well. But we're not talking about that, we're talking about the Cowboys anyway. So, what I can say about this game, I think the Cowboys will obviously put some points up against the Eagles, but the Eagles are a really good team. They obviously are on the first on the ladder, which I thought to myself, since they were sitting on the third place on the ladder, I thought to myself that whether or not if this game's going to be a really hard match, I thought that the Eagles are a really good team, but sometimes they will fall apart a little bit, which that means it's not going to be good for our fans that obviously love the Parramatta Eagles anyway. But this game's going to be a really hard match, and the Cowboys are going to probably struggle a little bit for this game. Whether or not, if they put a lot of pressure on up against the Parramatta Eagles, I reckon the Eagles will put a lot of pressure on up against the Cowboys. So I'm going to go with the Parramatta Eagles by 10 points. It won't be a really, I don't think it will be a really match of a flogging. I don't think it will be a very big margin for this game, and I think that this match will be a really focused on match, but for the Eels, they do play with a lot of pride and they don't give up, so they play with a lot of spirit and they train really hard to obviously make a win, or they try to obviously win, but sometimes they obviously lose, so I'm going to go with the Parramatta Eels by 10 points anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Titans going up against the Sharks. Now, what I can say about this game, Titans have obviously lost a lot of games, but they came back and won a couple of games of football. That means they are incredibly good, but they're not a top 8 contest. They're not a top 8 team. I just don't think that they are going to basically go up onto the ladder and just fall down again. If they obviously make a win sometimes, like if they make a win for a couple of matches, I just don't think that if this game's going to be a real hard game for the Titans, I just don't think they will have that consecutive team on the ladder for the competition. But really, it's how the way you want to play your football, but it's just depends who you play up against and what you play up against. So really, it's how the way if you want to play a really good game of football anyway. But for the Cronulla Sharks though, I just think that they are a really great team, and last time they played up against the Seagulls, it was obviously 40 points to 22 for that scoreline last week. And I think Sione Katoa, for that player of that team, I think he's going to have a great game for that match. I reckon he's going to score 3 tries, and I think he's going to have a great game for that season and obviously for that match. But I'm going to go with the Sharks by 18 points. This one's going to be a big margin, and I think that the Titans will obviously struggle again, and they'll obviously lose up against the Sharks. And I just think that this game's going to be a really tight contest up against the Titans anyway. The next game of that match, we see that the Warriors going up against the Broncos. Now, this game's going to be a real tight contest, but for the Warriors though, they have been struggling a little bit, but they obviously do make wins a couple of times. But I just don't think they'll conceal a lot of points up against the Broncos. Broncos are a really great team, but they do struggle a little bit. But they're just falling apart, and they're just playing terrible. But Corey Oates and Darius Boyd have been dropped. I'm not too sure who's going to be replacing them for that match. But for the Warriors, I just think that they are a really good team, but these two teams have been falling apart for the last couple of weeks. And these contests, this game, is going to be a real difficult game of football. But I just think that the Broncos will obviously form into a real good squad, and I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on up against the Warriors. And I just think for that game is going to be a real tight contest. But if this game's going to be a real tight contest, Broncos have to put a lot of effort, spirit, entertainment, and a lot of pressure on if they want to make a win up against the Warriors anyway. So I'm going to go with the Broncos by 6 points, and I reckon that this game is going to be an absolutely great match. But I don't think that this game will be a very high intensifying match that will defy whether or not if they're going to put a lot of points on up against the Warriors, or they're going to put small points on up against the Warriors. But it's not going to be a real tight contest. I reckon it'll be a very close contest, and I reckon that this game will be a certain game. But I'm going to go with the Broncos by 6 points anyway. The next game of that match, we see the West Tigers going up against the Panthers. Now, these two sides have been really good into the games. Excuse me. But whether or not, the Panthers have been a real good team. They have beaten the Melbourne Storm, the Manly Seagulls. Hang on, I just clicked my finger. And certainly the other squads. But I reckon for the West Tigers, though, they are a real good team, and I just think they'll probably come back for this game, and I think they will put a lot of pressure up against the Panthers. But certainly, though, the Panthers have been a real good contest of a team that just puts a lot of effort up against a different team that certainly will fall apart. And they have been, and I just think that they are gonna surprise me by a really good win. But it's just gonna be a real tight contest for this team that just does a lot of things right, and I just think the West Tigers will certainly fall apart a bit, and I reckon they will struggle for this game. So I'm going to go with the Panthers, though, by 12 points, and I reckon they'll get the job done up against the West Tigers. But certainly, though, the West Tigers have been a real good team, but I just don't think that the West Tigers will certainly put a lot of effort on up against the Panthers, and certainly it's going to be a real tight contest of a game. But I was going to go for the West Tigers, but they certainly aren't a real top 8 team or a top 4 team. But I'm going to go with the Panthers by 12 points anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Seagulls going up against the Knights. Now, this game's going to be a real tight of a contest. But the Manly Seagulls have fallen apart a little bit with so many injuries in that game last week up against the Sharks. And Tom Trbojevic, Brad Parker, Dylan Walker, and Moses Sully are out of that match, I think. But certainly Tommy Trbojevic won't be in that squad, because certainly with a hamstring injury, that would take a lot of effort to obviously recover from that injury. But this game is going to be a really tight of a contest, because the Newcastle Knights has certainly lost last week's match up against the Cowboys, and if they're going to win this game, they need to have a look at themselves and think they have to train really hard to make a real good win, and to make the timing of any tackles or any play the balls or anything like that certainly right. But really, it's going to be a hard match for this game, and I think the Seagulls will probably make a win for this game, but I don't think it will happen. I think the Newcastle Knights will certainly win this game, and I just think that this game will certainly be a real good match of a contest. So I'm going to go with the Newcastle Knights though by 16 points, and I think that this game will certainly benefit the Newcastle Knights team, and I just think that they will put a lot of points on up against the Seagulls, and I reckon that this match will be a certain high match of a contest for the scoreline, and I reckon that this game will be a very tight match of a contest anyway. And last but certainly not least, we see the Bulldogs going up against the Rabbitohs. Now, this game will be a very good match. I think that this game will be a very low average scoreline, but I don't think the Bulldogs will just get the job done up against the Rabbitohs, and certainly they probably won't, because they are on the wooden spooners ladder, the 16th ladder, and they are the last team to obviously fall last on that ladder anyway. But for the Bulldogs, they are falling apart a bit with Boade due to injury. He will be out of that squad, I think, since he picked up an injury. I'm not too sure if he is going to be back in or he'll be out of that squad. But if you guys obviously know, just comment down below if you want to. So, for the Rabbitohs though, since they think they've lost or won that game last week, I reckon that this game will be a really good matchup for the Rabbitohs. They are a really good team. They put certainly a real good game on up against a different team, the opposition team, but it's going to be a away team for obviously them, since they are versing the Bulldogs. I think that this game will be a really good tight of a contest, and certainly will, because I reckon Dane Gagai, Adam Reynolds, Damien Cook, certainly Alex Johnston, and I reckon Latrell Mitchell will be a very good squad, and I reckon that this game for them, they will certainly put a lot of tries on up against the Bulldogs, and I reckon that this game will be a certain great game, and I reckon that this match will be a very high match of a contest, and I reckon they'll put a lot of points on up against the Bulldogs anyway. So I'm certainly going to go with the Rabbitohs though by 20 points. This match will be a very good match, and I think that this game will be a tight match of a contest anyway. Thanks guys for watching my video, guys. Stay tuned for more. I will be doing a couple of videos coming to you guys soon. Also, I'll be doing more videos coming to you guys soon, so stay tuned for more. Plus, leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and for this video, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Till then, take care guys, stay safe, and have a good one. Plus, let's get up to 200 subscribers. We're sitting on 163 already. That's a halfway point anyway, so that means we need to get up to that reaching point, 200 subscribers anyway. But certainly, take care guys, and have a good one.